Montana Territory, 1878. The frontier town of Silver Creek perched on the edge of wilderness like a defiant outpost against nature's dominance. Dust devils danced through the single main street, where Victor Zimmerman dismounted his dun gelding, his trail-weary body grateful for solid ground after 3 weeks pushing cattle north from Wyoming. At 25, he'd already seen more of the untamed West than most men twice his age, and it had left him with an unshakable conviction. A man rides alone if he wants to keep breathing. The late afternoon sun cast long shadows across the weathered boardwalks as Victor secured his horse to the hitching post outside the Frontier Hotel. His lean frame carried the strength of a man accustomed to hard labor, though his face retained a youthfulness that belied his experience. He removed his dust-covered hat, revealing sandy brown hair in need of a trim, and brushed at his light stubble before stepping toward the hotel entrance. "Another town, another night," he muttered to himself. Keep to yourself, get supplies, and move on. It was the mantra that had kept him alive since he'd buried his family 5 years earlier. The frontier had taught Victor that attachments were luxury items a cowboy couldn't afford, not when outlaws, disease, or simple bad luck could snatch away everything in an instant. Inside the hotel lobby, he approached the front desk where a balding clerk with spectacles perched precariously on his nose barely acknowledged his presence. "Room for the night," Victor said, placing coins on the countertop. "And information about where a man might find decent work around these parts." The clerk pushed a ledger forward. "Sign here. As for work, Whitaker's Ranch 5 miles west is always looking for hands this time of year. Cattle drive season." As Victor signed the register, the lobby doors swung open, drawing his attention to a young woman entering with purposeful strides. She couldn't have been more than 22, with honey blonde hair cascading in loose waves beneath a modest bonnet. Her blue calico dress was practical but fitted well to her slender form. What caught Victor's attention wasn't her undeniable beauty, but rather the confidence with which she moved, as though she'd walked these floorboards 1,000 times before. "Good afternoon, Mr. Parsons," she addressed the clerk with familiarity. "I've come to collect that package for Dr. Henderson." The clerk's demeanor transformed instantly. "Miss Olivia, of course I've kept it safe as promised. Just arrived on yesterday's stage." He disappeared into a back room, returning moments later with a carefully wrapped parcel. "Thank you kindly," she replied, offering a warm smile that transformed her entire face. "The doctor will be most grateful." Victor couldn't help but notice her unusual accent, not quite southern but certainly not local to Montana. As she turned to leave, their eyes met briefly. Hers were a startling shade of blue that reminded him of summer skies over open prairie. She offered a polite nod before departing, leaving Victor with an unsettling realization. In a frontier town this size, everyone knew everyone. Yet this woman Daisy, the clerk had called her, moved with the certainty of a local while speaking with the refined tones of someone from much farther east. "Your keys, sir," the clerk interrupted his thoughts, sliding a brass key across the counter. "Room 4, top of the stairs." Victor nodded his thanks and headed upstairs, his cowboy instincts tingling with suspicion. Something about the woman didn't add up. In his experience, inconsistencies usually meant trouble, and trouble was exactly what he'd come to Silver Creek to avoid. After washing away the trail dust and changing into his last clean shirt, Victor headed to the Silver Dollar Saloon. The establishment buzzed with the usual frontier energy, card games in progress, working girls circulating among lonely men, and the piano player hammering out a lively tune. He ordered whiskey and found a corner table with his back to the wall, an old habit from too many nights in too many dangerous places. He was halfway through his drink when she walked in. The same blonde woman from the hotel, now without her bonnet, her hair pinned up to reveal a graceful neck. Every head turned as she made her way to the bar, but unlike most women who might venture into such establishments, she showed no discomfort. Instead, she conversed easily with the bartender, who slid a small glass of sherry her way without being asked. "Daisy O'Malley," came a gruff voice beside Victor. He turned to find an older man with a sheriff's badge pinned to his vest settling into the adjacent chair. "Noticed you watching her. Everyone does when she comes in. Not many proper ladies brave enough to enter the Silver Dollar, but she's different." Victor took another sip of whiskey. Just surprised to see a young woman alone in a place like this. The sheriff chuckled. "She's picking up medicine money from Doc Henderson's patients. Does it once a week." He extended a weathered hand. Sheriff Malcolm Brooks. Victor Zimmerman, he replied, shaking the offered hand, just passing through. Mostar, Brooks said, his eyes narrowing slightly, looking for trouble or work. Work, Victor answered firmly. Heard Whitaker might be hiring. The sheriff nodded approvingly. Good outfit, fair pay. He rose to his feet. Word of advice, Zimmerman, Silver Creek looks peaceful, but we've had our share of trouble lately. Keep your eyes open and your head down. As the sheriff departed, Victor's attention returned to Daisy O'Malley. She was speaking with the barkeeper again, but this time her expression had changed. She was asking questions, her eyes scanning the room periodically. When her gaze landed on him for the second time that day, Victor felt an inexplicable pull that contradicted every survival instinct he'd cultivated. For reasons he couldn't explain, he raised his glass in a subtle salute. After a moment's hesitation, she did the same with her sherry before turning back to her conversation. It wasn't until later, when Victor was walking back to his hotel room under the star-filled Montana sky, that he realized what had been bothering him. Daisy O'Malley navigated Silver Creek with the comfortable knowledge of a lifelong resident. Yet something in the way she observed her surroundings, constantly cataloging faces, marking exits, reminded him of someone who needed to know escape routes. He'd seen that vigilance before, in his own reflection. The next morning found Victor at Whitaker's ranch where the foreman, a no-nonsense man named Harley Jenkins, sized him up with experienced eyes. Ever worked a cattle drive before? Jenkins asked, leaning against the corral fence. 8 drives from Texas to Kansas, 2 from Wyoming Territory, Victor replied, demonstrating his skill with a lasso on a nearby post. Can break horses, mend fences, and I'm handy with a branding iron. Jenkins nodded approvingly. We lost 3 men to gold fever last month, heading out next week with 500 head to the railhead in Helena. Pays $40 for the month, plus room and board while you're here. Fair enough, Victor agreed, shaking on the deal. As he rode back toward town for supplies, he spotted a familiar blue dress outside the doctor's office. Daisy O'Malley was loading baskets into a small wagon, her movements efficient and practiced. On impulse, he directed his horse toward her. Need a hand with those, he called as he approached. She looked up, recognition flickering in her eyes. The cowboy from the hotel, she said with a slight smile. Thank you, but I can manage. Victor dismounted anyway. Victor Zimmerman, he introduced himself, tipping his hat. Seems a lot for one person to handle. Daisy O'Malley, she replied, her accent less pronounced than the previous day. Doctor. Henderson sends medicines to outlying farms weekly. I deliver them. Alone, Victor asked, unable to hide his concern. The territory can be dangerous for solitary travelers. A flash of something, amusement, perhaps, or defiance, crossed her features. I assure you, Mr. Zimmerman, I'm quite capable of taking care of myself. Never suggested otherwise, Miss O'Malley. He lifted one of the heavier baskets into her wagon. But even capable people appreciate help now and then. She studied him for a moment, as though weighing her response. Are you new to Silver Creek? I don't recall seeing you before yesterday. Just arrived, he confirmed. Hired on with Whitaker's outfit for their drive to Helena. Ah, Mr. Whitaker runs a respectable operation, she said, with the certainty of someone who'd known the rancher for years. Victor couldn't resist. You seem to know this town well. Her movements paused almost imperceptibly before she continued arranging the baskets. It's a small community. Everyone knows everyone else's business. She secured the wagon's load with practiced efficiency. Thank you for your assistance, Mr. Zimmerman. As she climbed onto the wagon seat, Victor stepped back. Perhaps I'll see you around town, Miss O'Malley. Perhaps, she agreed, though something in her tone suggested she doubted it. With a flick of the reins, she set the wagon in motion, leaving Victor with more questions than answers. Over the next few days, Victor settled into the pre-drive routine at Whitaker's ranch, breaking horses and mending equipment. But his thoughts frequently drifted to the mysterious Daisy O'Malley. She claimed to work for the doctor, yet moved through town with the authority of someone with deeper roots. Her accent seemed to shift subtly depending on who she addressed, and while Silver Creek was indeed small, her knowledge of local affairs seemed unusually comprehensive. His curiosity got the better of him on Sunday, when he attended services at the town's only church. The modest white building was filled to capacity when Victor slipped into a back pew, his hat respectfully held in calloused hands. He spotted Daisy near the front, sitting beside an elderly man he presumed to be Dr. Henderson. After the service, as congregants mingled outside, Victor overheard fragments of conversation that caught his attention. "Fifth anniversary next month. Terrible tragedy. Never did find who was responsible." When he approached the church bulletin board, a weathered notice caught his eye. It announced a memorial service planned for the following month, commemorating the Silver Creek tragedy that had claimed the lives of 12 people 5 years earlier. Victor was studying it when a voice beside him made him start. "A terrible day for our town," said Dr. Henderson, his aged frame supported by a walking stick. 5 years next month, and some wounds still haven't healed." "What happened?" Victor asked. "Bank robbery gone wrong," the doctor explained, his voice lowering. "Outlaws came through during the Founders' Day celebration. When the shooting stopped, 12 good people were dead, including our previous sheriff and the banker's entire family." He shook his head sadly. "Some say the O'Malley girl was the luckiest one that day, being the only survivor of that family, though I imagine lucky isn't how she'd describe it." Victor's attention sharpened. "O'Malley, as in Daisy O'Malley." The doctor looked confused. "Daisy." No, I meant," he stopped abruptly as Daisy herself approached, her expression carefully composed. "Dr. Henderson, Mrs. Calloway is asking for you," she said smoothly, though her eyes flickered briefly to Victor with something akin to wariness. "Of course, my dear. Excuse me, Mr. Zimmerman." The doctor patted Daisy's arm affectionately before moving away. Left alone with Victor, Daisy maintained her polite demeanor, though tension radiated from her slender frame. "Enjoying the service, Mr. Zimmerman?" "It was fine," he replied, studying her more intently now. "The doctor was just telling me about a tragedy that happened here some years back." "Silver Creek has had its share of sorrows, like any frontier town," she replied noncommittally. "He mentioned an O'Malley family," Victor pressed gently. "Any relation?" Something shuddered behind her eyes. "A common enough Irish name, Mr. Zimmerman. If you'll excuse me, I should help with the Sunday school children." As she walked away, Victor couldn't shake the feeling that he'd touched a nerve, and possibly stumbled onto the explanation for Daisy O'Malley's contradictions. If she had lost family in that tragedy, perhaps she had left town afterward, only to return recently. It would explain her knowledge of the area combined with her somewhat Eastern mannerisms. Yet instinct told him there was more to the story. His opportunity to investigate further came unexpectedly the next day. Victor was in the general store purchasing supplies when a commotion erupted outside. A wagon had overturned in the street, and beneath it lay a young boy, crying out in pain. Victor rushed outside with the other customers to find Daisy already kneeling beside the child, her dress getting soiled in the mud as she spoke soothingly to him. "Someone fetch Dr. Henderson," she called out, her voice steady despite the emergency. Victor and several other men carefully lifted the wagon off the boy. Daisy's hands moved with practiced precision, examining the child's injured leg without causing further distress. "Nothing broken, Tommy," she assured him with professional confidence that seemed beyond that of a doctor's assistant. "Just a bad bruise and some scrapes. You'll be running again by week's end." When the doctor arrived, he merely confirmed Daisy's assessment. Victor watched as she assisted Henderson with cleaning and bandaging the boy's wounds, her movements suggesting formal medical training rather than merely learned experience. Later, as Daisy washed blood from her hands at the water pump behind the doctor's office, Victor approached her. "That was impressive work with the boy," he said. "You handle yourself like someone with medical training." She dried her hands on a towel, her expression guarded. "I've assisted Dr. Henderson long enough to learn a few things." "Seems like more than just observation," Victor persisted, "almost like you studied medicine formally." A flash of something, pride, perhaps, crossed her features before she controlled it. "Women can learn many things, Mr. Zimmerman, even without formal education." "I never suggested otherwise," he said, leaning against the pump, "but you're not just the doctor's assistant, are you? There's more to your story." For a moment he thought she might continue denying it, but instead she sighed. "Why are you so interested in my background, Mr. Zimmerman?" "I'm nobody of consequence in Silver Creek." "I disagree," he said quietly. I think you're someone who knows this town better than a newcomer should, someone who carries herself like she's had education beyond what's common for frontier women. Someone who seems to be hiding something." Her blue eyes darkened. "We all have secrets, Cowboy. Some are best left buried." Before he could respond, Dr. Henderson called from inside the building, and Daisy seized the opportunity to escape the conversation. That evening, unable to shake his curiosity, Victor found himself in the small cemetery behind the church. Among the wooden markers and modest headstones, he located a larger monument dedicated to the victims of the Silver Creek tragedy, 1873. Listed were 12 names, including the O'Malley family. Patrick, Margaret, and Diana, age 17. Diana O'Malley, not Daisy. Victor stood staring at the stone as pieces began fitting together in his mind. The doctor had mentioned an O'Malley girl who survived. If Diana O'Malley had been presumed dead but actually survived, it would explain why Daisy knew the town so intimately while maintaining the mannerisms of someone who'd been away. But why the deception? Why return under a false name? The answer came to him like a bullet. If the outlaws responsible had never been caught, perhaps they still posed a threat. Perhaps Diana O'Malley had returned to find justice or vengeance for her family. His thoughts were interrupted by the unmistakable sound of a pistol being cocked behind him. "Step away from the grave, Mr. Zimmerman," came Daisy's voice, harder than he'd heard it before. "And explain why you're so interested in the dead." Victor raised his hand slowly and turned to face her. In the fading light, her face was a study in controlled fury, her hands steady on the revolver pointed at his chest. "I could ask you the same question, Miss O'Malley," he replied evenly. "Or should I say Miss Diana O'Malley?" Her expression didn't change, but something flickered in her eyes, confirmation enough. "You've been investigating me." "Why?" "Professional habit," he admitted. "I notice things that don't add up. A young woman who knows every corner of a town she supposedly just works in, who speaks like she's educated back east but handles frontier emergencies with ease. Who carries herself with constant awareness of her surroundings." He paused, like someone who knows she might be recognized. "And what is your profession exactly?" she demanded, the gun unwavering. "You claim to be a cowboy, but you ask too many questions for a man just passing through." "I am a cowboy," Victor insisted, "but before that, I rode with the Pinkerton Detective Agency for 2 years. Old habits die hard." This revelation seemed to surprise her. After a long moment, she lowered the gun slightly. "If you're telling the truth, then you understand why someone might need to change their identity." Victor nodded slowly. "The outlaws who killed your family, they were never caught." "No," she confirmed, bitterness edging her voice. "They rode away with the bank's money and my family's blood on their hands. The town buried an unidentifiable female body they assumed was me." "And you've come back to find them," he guessed. Her laugh was hollow. "I never left, Mr. Zimmerman. I was found half dead by a traveling doctor who took me east to recover. He and his wife gave me a new name, a new life. They paid for my medical education." Her voice softened slightly. "When Dr. Henderson wrote that he was getting too old to practice alone, I saw my opportunity to return, to find the men who destroyed everything I loved. After 5 years, the trail must be cold." "Not as cold as you might think," Diana replied. "One of them has been back through Silver Creek twice in the past year, spending money like a man with no worries about the law." Victor processed this information carefully. "Does Sheriff Brooks know your true identity?" "Is he helping you?" She shook her head. "No one knows except Dr. Henderson, and now you." She finally holstered her weapon. "So what happens now, former Pinkerton man? Will you expose me to the town? Ruin any chance I have of finding justice?" The question hung between them in the gathering dusk. Victor considered his options, weighing his instinct for self-preservation against the unmistakable pull he felt toward this woman and her quest. "I came to Silver Creek because I'm tired of running," he admitted finally. 5 years ago, outlaws killed my family in Colorado. I've been drifting ever since, convinced that caring about anything or anyone was just inviting more pain." He met her gaze directly. "Maybe I was drawn to your story because it mirrors my own." Something in Diana's posture softened. "Then you understand why I have to see this through." "I do," he agreed. "But vengeance is dangerous business, especially alone." "Are you offering to help?" she asked, surprise evident in her voice. Victor hadn't planned to, hadn't even considered it until the words left his mouth. "Maybe I am." For the first time since he'd met her, Diana O'Malley, or Daisy as she was now known, smiled genuinely. It transformed her face from merely beautiful to radiant, despite the gravity of their conversation. "Tomorrow night," she said quietly, "meet me at the doctor's office after dark. I'll show you what I've learned." As they walked back toward town side by side, maintaining a respectable distance between them, Victor felt something he hadn't experienced in years. The sensation of walking toward something instead of away from his past. The next evening, Victor slipped through the back door of the doctor's office as instructed. Diana was waiting, her practical day dress exchanged for trousers and a man's shirt that did little to disguise her femininity but allowed for easier movement. Her honey-blonde hair was braided and pinned up beneath a cap. Not many women brave enough to wear men's clothing, Victor observed. Not many women forced to learn to shoot, ride, and track like a man, she countered, leading him to a small room behind the examination area. "Dr. Henderson lets me use this space for my research." The walls were covered with maps, newspaper clippings, and sketches of 4 men's faces. Notes in a neat, precise hand connected various elements with red string. Victor recognized the methodical approach of a detective's case board. "These are the men who killed my family," Diana explained, pointing to the sketches. "Bill Rollins, the leader, Thomas Green and Lester Phillips, his most loyal men, and this one," she indicated the 4th drawing, "is Samuel Tucker. He's the one who's been back to Silver Creek." Victor studied the faces, committing them to memory. What's their pattern? Men like this usually have one. "Banks and stagecoaches, primarily," she replied, showing him newspaper accounts of robberies across 3 territories. They disappear for months, then hit several targets in quick succession before vanishing again. "And you believe they're planning another job in Silver Creek?" Diana nodded, pointing to a calendar where several dates were circled. "Next week is the anniversary of the original robbery. It's also when the mining company payroll comes through, twice the usual amount because of the new silver strike." Victor whistled low, a tempting target. "Exactly," she agreed. "Tucker was in town last month, drinking at the Silver Dollar. He didn't recognize me. Why would he? Diana O'Malley is dead as far as he knows, but I recognized him immediately." Her voice hardened. "He was watching the bank, noting the guard rotations, making plans." "If you're right about them returning, what do you intend to do?" Victor asked. Diana met his gaze unflinchingly. "Bring them to justice. Alert the sheriff when they arrive, ensure they're arrested. And if that fails..." Her silence was answer enough. Over the next several days, Victor divided his time between preparing for the cattle drive and helping Diana refine her surveillance of the town. They established a code for passing messages, folded papers left in specific books at the general store, and took turns watching the main roads into Silver Creek. As they worked together, Victor found himself increasingly drawn to Diana's courage and determination. She had transformed devastating loss into purposeful action, returning to the place of her greatest pain to prevent others from suffering a similar fate. Her intelligence and resilience challenged everything he'd come to believe about needing to remain unattached and alone on the frontier. For her part, Diana gradually revealed more of herself beyond the mission of justice. During a quiet evening keeping watch from the church bell tower, she spoke of her time studying medicine in Boston, of her dream to eventually establish a proper hospital in Silver Creek. "This town gave me everything and took it all away in a single day," she explained, her voice soft in the darkness. "I want to give something back, help it heal, the way I've tried to heal myself." "A noble ambition," Victor replied, acutely aware of her proximity in the confined space. "Most would have stayed east, built a new life far from such painful memories." "I considered it," she admitted, "but every night I'd dream of this place, of unfinished business." She turned to face him, moonlight illuminating her features. "What about you, after your family? Did you never think of settling somewhere new?" Victor stared out at the sleeping town below them, never stayed anywhere long enough to consider it. "The closest I came was with the Pinkertons, but even that felt temporary." He paused, surprising himself with his next words. "Silver Creek has a certain appeal, though." "Does it?" she asked, her voice carefully neutral. "Parts of it," he replied, meeting her gaze meaningfully. The moment stretched between them, taut with unspoken possibility, until the distant sound of approaching riders broke the spell. Diana pressed a finger to her lips and pointed toward the north road. 3 shadowed figures on horseback were making their way slowly toward town. "Is it them?" Victor whispered. Diana raised a small spyglass to her eye. "Yes," she confirmed, her voice tight. "Rollins, Green, and Phillips. Tucker must already be in town." "We should alert the sheriff," Victor suggested. "Not yet," Diana countered. "Brooks is a good man, but he'll want to confront them immediately. We need to catch them in the act with evidence that will ensure they hang." Her expression hardened. "I won't risk them escaping justice again." The riders disappeared into the shadows near the livery stable. Diana and Victor watched until all movement ceased, then carefully descended from the tower. "I'll follow them tomorrow, see where they're staying," Victor offered as they parted at the edge of town. Diana nodded. "Be careful. These men won't hesitate to kill anyone who threatens their plans." Her hand briefly touched his arm, including curious cowboys. "I've survived worse odds," he assured her, covering her hand with his own for a brief, electric moment before she withdrew it. The next morning, Victor located the outlaws' camp in an abandoned line shack 2 miles outside town. He observed them long enough to confirm they were indeed planning something, then returned to Silver Creek to update Diana through their prearranged signal system. By nightfall, they had determined that the robbery would likely occur in 2 days, when the mining payroll was scheduled to arrive. The outlaws had been seen meeting with Tucker at the livery, where maps were spread out under lantern light. "We need to bring the sheriff in now," Victor insisted when they met behind the doctor's office. "This is becoming too dangerous to handle alone." "One more day," Diana pleaded. "Let me gather final proof of their identities and intentions, then we'll take everything to Brooks." Reluctantly, Victor agreed, though uneasiness gnawed at him. The stakes were escalating rapidly, and Diana's personal involvement clouded her judgment. Her desire for justice walked a dangerous line with vengeance. That night, everything changed. Victor was returning to his lodgings at Whitaker's ranch when he spotted a familiar figure slipping into the Silver Dollar Saloon, Samuel Tucker. On instinct, he followed, keeping to the shadows as he entered the busy establishment. Tucker was seated at a corner table with a man Victor hadn't seen before. Their conversation appeared heated, with Tucker repeatedly shaking his head while the stranger leaned forward insistently. Victor positioned himself at the bar, angling to overhear fragments of their discussion. "Change the plan. Rollins won't like. Tomorrow instead." Victor's blood ran cold. They were moving up their timetable. He needed to warn Diana immediately. As he turned to leave, his path was blocked by none other than Bill Rollins himself. The outlaw leader's weathered face split into a predatory smile. "Even in, Cowboy," Rollins drawled, his hand resting casually near his holstered pistol. "Tucker says you've been mighty interested in our business." Victor maintained a neutral expression, though his mind raced. "Don't know what you're talking about, mister. Just came in for a drink." "Funny thing," Rollins continued, gesturing to his men who were now positioning themselves around Victor. "Tucker also says he saw you with a blonde woman. One who looks remarkably like a girl who should be dead and buried." His smile disappeared. "So I'll ask once, who are you and what do you know?" In that moment, Victor realized they'd been compromised. Somehow Tucker had recognized Diana despite her disguise, and now not only was the element of surprise lost, but Diana herself might be in danger. "Name's Victor Zimmerman," he replied, calculating his odds against 4 armed men. "I'm a cowboy working for Whitaker's ranch. The woman's my sweetheart, nothing more to tell." Rollins studied him for a long moment. "Zimmerman, huh? Well, Mr. Zimmerman, you have a choice. Walk out of here, ride out of town tonight, and forget everything you might think you know. Or," his hand tapped his pistol meaningfully, "I've got a cattle drive starting tomorrow," Victor said casually. "Can't just leave my job." "Then I suggest you get very busy with those cows," Rollins warned. "Stay far from town and keep your blonde friend with you." He leaned closer. "Because if I see either of you anywhere near the bank tomorrow, I'll finish what I started 5 years ago." The confirmation sent ice through Victor's veins. These men knew Diana was alive. They were accelerating their plans. "And they just issued a death threat." "I understand," Victor managed, maintaining his facade of confusion. "No need for trouble." Rollins stepped aside, allowing Victor to leave. The moment he was outside, he broke into a run toward the doctor's office, praying he wasn't too late. He found Diana organizing medical supplies, blissfully unaware of the danger bearing down on them. When he burst through the door, she turned in surprise. "Victor, what's happened?" "They know," he said without preamble. "They recognized you. The robbery is happening tomorrow, and they've threatened to kill us both if we interfere." Color drained from Diana's face. "How I was so careful." "It doesn't matter now," Victor pressed. "We need to alert Sheriff Brooks immediately." Diana shook her head, backing away. "No, this changes everything. If they know who I am, they'll be watching the sheriff's office." "We can't risk it." "Then what do you suggest?" Victor demanded. "Let them rob the bank and ride away again." "Of course not," she snapped, moving to a cabinet and unlocking it. Inside was a Remington revolver and boxes of ammunition. "I'll stop them myself." "That's suicide," Victor argued, grabbing her arm. 4 against 1. They'll kill you before you get off a second shot. "I've waited 5 years for justice," Diana said, her voice trembling with emotion. "I won't let them escape again." "And I won't let you throw your life away," Victor countered, his grip gentling but remaining firm. "Your parents wouldn't want you to die seeking vengeance." His words seemed to reach her. Diana's shoulders slumped, and for a moment she looked every bit the vulnerable young woman she was beneath her strength. "Then what? What do we do?" Victor thought quickly. "We need to set a trap." Something they won't expect. An idea formed in his mind. "The bank manager, do you trust him?" "Mr. Hollister, yes, he replaced the man who died in the original robbery." "Why?" "Because," Victor explained, "we're going to rob the bank before they do." Dawn found them executing Victor's audacious plan. With the reluctant cooperation of bank manager Hollister, they removed the mining payroll to a secure location and replaced it with marked bills. Sheriff Brooks, finally brought into their confidence, positioned deputies strategically throughout town, disguised as ordinary citizens. The trap was set. Now they needed the outlaws to spring it. "Remember," Victor told Diana as they took their positions in the hotel room overlooking the bank, "let the sheriff handle the arrests. Our job is just to alert him when they make their move." Diana nodded, though the determined set of her jaw gave Victor pause. "I'll do my part," she promised, checking her revolver one final time. They didn't have long to wait. At precisely 9 o'clock, when the bank opened its doors, Rollins and his men made their approach. From their vantage point, Victor and Diana watched as the outlaws entered the building with casual confidence, as though conducting legitimate business. "Now," Diana whispered, raising a small mirror to flash the prearranged signal to a deputy positioned on the rooftop across the street. Within moments, chaos erupted. Gunfire exploded from inside the bank, followed by shouting and the sounds of breaking glass. Sheriff Brooks and his men converged on the building from all sides. "Stay here," Victor ordered, drawing his own revolver. "I'm going to help Brooks." "No," Diana protested, gripping his arm. "It's too dangerous. Let the law handle it." As they argued, 2 figures burst from the bank's side door, Rollins and Tucker, carrying saddlebags presumably filled with the marked money. They fired backward at pursuers as they ran toward horses hitched nearby. "They're escaping," Diana gasped, already moving toward the door. "Diana, wait," Victor called, but she was already racing down the hotel stairs. By the time he caught up, she was in the street, her revolver raised as Rollins mounted his horse. "Bill Rollins," she called out, her voice carrying across the suddenly silent street. "Do you remember me?" The outlaw turned, confusion giving way to shock as recognition dawned. "Not possible," he muttered, loud enough to be heard. "You're dead." "You failed," Diana replied, her aim steady. "Diana O'Malley lived, and she's here to see justice done." What happened next unfolded with terrible swiftness. Rollins raised his gun. Victor shouted a warning, running toward Diana. Tucker, seeing an opportunity, took aim at the sheriff emerging from the bank. 3 shots rang out almost simultaneously. Rollins tumbled from his saddle. Tucker clutched his chest, blood blossoming on his shirt. And Diana collapsed to the dusty street, a crimson stain spreading across her shoulder. "Diana," Victor cried, skidding to his knees beside her. "Stay with me, stay with me." Her blue eyes fluttered open, clouded with pain but alert. "Did we get them?" she whispered. "All 4, he confirmed, applying pressure to her wound. "It's over." Dr. Henderson arrived moments later, his medical bag in hand. Get her to my office quickly, he ordered, already examining the injury. The bullet passed through. If we prevent infection, she should recover. As they carried Diana to the doctor's office, the townsfolk of Silver Creek gathered, whispering among themselves as the truth of Daisy O'Malley's identity spread like wildfire. Victor remained by her side throughout, refusing to leave even when Dr. Henderson began surgical procedures to clean and close the wound. Hours later, with Diana sleeping peacefully under the influence of laudanum, Sheriff Brooks pulled Victor aside. "You two took one hell of a risk," he said, though there was admiration in his gruff voice. "But you brought down the men who have terrorized 3 territories, found the money from the original robbery too, in their saddlebags." "Will she face charges?" Victor asked, nodding toward the sleeping woman. "For concealing her identity." Brooks shook his head. "Far as I'm concerned, Diana O'Malley died 5 years ago. Daisy O'Malley is a respected member of this community who helped catch dangerous criminals." He clapped Victor on the shoulder. "You're not so bad yourself, for a cowboy. Whitaker says the drive can wait a week if you want to stay until she's recovered." Victor looked at Diana's peaceful face, feeling something unfamiliar bloom in his chest. Hope, perhaps. "Or possibility, I'd appreciate that." In the days that followed, as Diana began her recovery, Victor remained in Silver Creek. He took a room at the hotel, splitting his time between helping at Whitaker's ranch and sitting with Diana as she regained her strength. They talked for hours about their pasts, about justice versus vengeance, about what it meant to build something new from the ashes of tragedy. "The town knows who I really am now," Diana said one evening, sitting up in bed for the first time. "I'm not sure I can stay." "Why not?" Victor asked, setting aside the book he'd been reading to her. "From what I've heard, most folks consider you a hero." "But the deception was necessary," he finished for her. "Anyone would understand that. Besides," he added with a small smile, "this town needs a good doctor. Someone told me she was planning to build a proper hospital here." Diana's expression softened. "That dream seems possible now. Without looking over my shoulder, without the weight of unfinished business." "Then stay," Victor urged, taking her hand in his. "Build that hospital, help this community heal like you said you wanted to." "And what about you?" she asked, her fingers tightening around his. "The cattle drive to Helena awaits." Victor took a deep breath, confronting the realization that had been building since that first moment in the hotel lobby. "I've been running for 5 years, Diana. Convinced that caring about anyone or anything would only lead to more pain." He met her gaze directly. "But watching you face your past, seeing you risk everything for justice and then choose to build something new, it's shown me there might be another way to live." "What are you saying?" she whispered, hope illuminating her blue eyes. "I'm saying maybe Silver Creek needs more than a doctor. Maybe it needs a lawman too," he smiled. "Brooks offered me a deputy position this morning. Said any man who could plan a fake bank robbery to catch outlaws had the right kind of thinking for law work." Joy blossomed across Diana's features. "And you accepted?" "Told him I needed to discuss it with someone first," Victor replied, his thumb tracing circles on her palm. "Someone whose opinion matters to me." "In that case," Diana said, her free hand reaching up to touch his face, "I think Silver Creek would be fortunate to have Deputy Zimmerman protecting it." The space between them disappeared as Victor leaned forward, his lips finding hers in a kiss that felt like coming home after years of wandering. In that moment, all the false beliefs that had driven them both, that love was a luxury the frontier wouldn't allow, that attachment meant vulnerability, that the past defined the future, crumbled like the walls they'd built around their hearts. 3 months later, on a crisp autumn day, the people of Silver Creek gathered to celebrate 2 momentous occasions: the groundbreaking for the new hospital and the wedding of Dr. Diana O'Malley to Deputy Victor Zimmerman. Standing before the town that had witnessed both her greatest tragedy and her ultimate triumph, Diana looked radiant in a simple white dress, her honey-blonde hair adorned with wildflowers. Beside her, Victor stood tall and proud, his customary alertness softened by the unmistakable look of a man who had found his place in the world. 5 years ago, Diana began her vows, her voice clear and strong. "I believed that everything I loved had been taken from me. I returned to Silver Creek seeking justice, but what I found instead was a future." She squeezed Victor's hands. "In you, I discovered that courage isn't just about facing the past, it's about embracing tomorrow, even when it terrifies you." Victor's voice was steady as he responded, though emotion made it deeper than usual. I spent years believing that the frontier was no place for love, that a man rides alone if he wants to keep breathing. He smiled at the woman before him. You taught me that true strength comes not from isolation, but from finding someone worth fighting alongside. Someone worth building a life with. As they exchanged rings and sealed their vows with a kiss, the townsfolk of Silver Creek erupted in cheers and applause. Sheriff Brooks, serving as best man, wiped suspiciously at his eyes before raising his voice to be heard. Ladies and gentlemen, I give you Mr. and Mrs. Zimmerman. May they find in each other what Silver Creek has always represented, not just survival against the harshness of the frontier, but the promise that with courage and community, we can build something enduring in even the wildest places. That evening, as they stood on the porch of their new home, a modest cabin with a view of both the mountains and the growing town, Victor wrapped his arms around his wife from behind. Both of them watching as the setting sun painted the western sky in brilliant hues of orange and gold. Any regrets? He asked softly, his breath warm against her ear. Diana leaned back against his chest, secure in the embrace of the man who had helped her transform vengeance into justice and isolation into belonging. Not one, she replied, turning in his arms to face him, though I am curious about something. What's that? Her lips curved in a mischievous smile. When did you first suspect I wasn't who I claimed to be? Victor laughed, drawing her closer. From the very beginning, he admitted. A cowboy notices when a woman knows a town too well for a stranger. And yet you stayed, she marveled, even knowing I was hiding something. Some mysteries are worth solving, he murmured, lowering his lips to hers once more. Some journeys worth taking, no matter where they led. As darkness settled over Silver Creek, the light from their window glowed like a beacon, a testament to two souls who had found in each other not just healing for the wounds of the past, but the courage to build a future neither had dared imagine possible in the untamed promise of the American West.